IMT, a Monday night must.
I watch it religiously, on my knees every Monday night.
It's people, music, ugly dogs and all.
Here they come. Could we do it again?
IMT Live, 9:30 Monday on 9.
Cabinet finalising its tax package as more GST opponents surface. New South Wales towns brace against rising floodwaters, and the tidal wave tragedy, Australian medical teams feeling the strain.
From National 9 News, this is Nightline with Jim Waley.
Good evening. Still feeling the strain of the Telstra back-off, the Coalition has now been warned it faces a ratepayer revolt over a GST on local government services. The caution came as a senior government minister clashed with a lone protester following today's cabinet meeting, which was called to discuss the tax package. Laurie Wilson has our report.
It's been a bad week for Communications Minister Richard Alston. Forced to back off on his plans for the full sale of Telstra, the minister was clearly in no mood for a lone protester who tried to block his path as he left a cabinet meeting in Sydney.
Are you wanting to be arrested, are you, or what?
As the politician and the protester faced off for the cameras, the unlikely confrontation only confirmed the impression of a government under pressure. Its future now hinging on the success of its tax reforms.
We continue to work on tax reform to make sure we can get a better system for taxpayers generally, and particularly tax relief for hard-pressed families.
But opposition seems to be growing by the day. The welfare lobby says it won't support a GST on food. Now local government wants to be exempt as well, claiming a GST on local government services would add around $1 billion a year to ratepayers' bills.
If it's garbage, there's 10% on that. If it's every time you turn on the tap, there's 10% on that. Sewerage, there's 10% on that.
Local government says it hasn't been consulted, and it warns it is prepared to campaign against the tax package.
We represent people across Australia. The same people who are voting are our ratepayers.
Given his problems in the bush, the last thing John Howard needs now is a ratepayers' revolt. Laurie Wilson reporting for Nightline.
The residents of the flood-threatened town of Narrabri in northern New South Wales continue to barricade their streets and homes against the rapidly rising Namoi River. It's still uncertain when the floodwaters, which relentlessly edged up during the day, will peak.
Residents of Narrabri today have been doing their best to prepare for the worst. Already 10 houses and businesses have been inundated. Another 50 are in the immediate path of the floodwaters.
It won't have to go all that much higher, and we're starting to look at an equivalent 1955 type flood level.
Despite the best resources available, officials can only offer predictions. What the floodwaters actually do remains the great unknown. For the people of Narrabri, it's bound to be an anxious 48 hours. People are pinning their hopes on 27,000 sandbags, which form a flimsy wall of protection for those buildings most under threat.
It's not our best line of defence, it's our only line of defence.
The water has been rising all day.
It's 3 rooms of new carpet, so yeah, get it up, save it and put it down again later once we clean the mess up.
This afternoon, a motorist chanced his arm in a flood-swollen street. He lost. While Narrabri is now a town in waiting, further upstream at Gunnedah, people have begun assessing their losses. Some residents have managed to return to their homes. For 20 families, it could be at least another few days. Apart from the main towns, several farming communities have been cut off by the floods. Helicopters have been flown in to carry out food drops. Essentials like milk and bread will have to last until at least the weekend. Damien Ryan in Narrabri for Nightline.
The survivors of Papua New Guinea's tidal wave tragedy now face the daunting prospect of how to rebuild their lives in the shadow of such traumatic losses. With more than 1,200 confirmed dead and thousands still missing, for some, any thoughts of the future are still too far ahead.
For the Australian medical team, the last 24 hours may well have been the hardest. A night and a day of saving lives by amputating limbs after an influx of patients from Aitapi village.
We've taken off, I don't know, six legs tonight, I think, between us, and it's pretty miserable.
Sebastian Alosi, his father believes he's 7 or 8, has become a symbol of these people's suffering and of the Australian effort to relieve that pain. So brave last night, as was his father when he was told gently that his son might lose both his legs. Today, Sebastian is doing okay. His left leg is gone, but his right leg is intact and probably safe from the ravages of gangrene. But the surgeon who saved the little boy's life is plainly feeling the strain.
It makes one pretty grateful for how well off we are and how much we take for granted. The very least that we can do is what we have been doing here.
As if the people here haven't suffered enough, there have been over the last 2 days a series of earth tremors, strong enough to be clearly felt, although not strong enough to stir the sea into a repeat of Friday's devastation. Where to go, where and how to live remain the questions for the traumatized survivors of these decimated villages. Some drift back to salvage what they can. One woman has returned home to be buried. She lost her leg. The doctors couldn't save her. In Papua New Guinea, Hugh Remington for Nightline.
The family of the late rugby league star Peter Jackson is taking legal action against a leading Queensland school where it's claimed he was sexually molested as a boy. The man accused of interfering with him, a former school football coach, has disappeared.
When Jacko's extended football family farewelled the irrepressible character last November, few knew the dark secret that had been troubling him. According to his lawyers, school football coach Ozzy McNamara carried on systematic sexual abuse during Jackson's years at the Southport school.
I think his wife was the only one really that knew about it. It was something that eroded away from him, at him for a long, long time. He didn't enjoy it, and I think it was something that he just couldn't deal with in the end.
The end came last November. Jacko's body found in a Sydney motel room, the victim of a heroin overdose. He had begun taking legal action against the school's administrator, the Anglican Church, and now the family is seeing it through.
Peter didn't want this to turn into a three-ring media circus. He wanted it to be handled in a dignified and unsensationalised way.
On the field, Peter Jackson was a standout performer. Off the field, his role changed to the clown prince of rugby league, ever the man with a joke and a jibe.
What about Wayne Pearce? He doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't eat junk food. The man's a disgrace to the game, really, isn't he?
If Peter Jackson, found it impossible to deal with, it must have been something that nobody would want to go through.
Ozzy McNamara wasn't at his Jimboomba home today, and his boss said he didn't show up for work this morning. The 65-year-old has allegedly made a full confession in a taped interview for the Jackson family lawyers. Steve Marshall for Nightline.
After the break, the death of America's first space hero, and revealed at last how England plotted to kill Adolf Hitler. Construction unions have vowed to dig in their heels over a dispute that could stop work on Melbourne's CityLink freeway project. It wasn't a workers' grievance that prompted a mass meeting today, rather a row between the builder of the project's Western Link, Balderstone Hornibrook, and head contractor Transfield Obayashi. Balderstone Hornibrook has threatened to pull out of the project, claiming it's owed $200 million. The unions say they're the meat in the sandwich and will bring the project to a halt if they lose their jobs. Britain has at last unveiled one of its closest kept secrets of World War II, its plots to kill Adolf Hitler. Files now released have detailed how agents came up with numerous fanciful schemes, everything from poison to airborne assaults.
Hitler's Berchtesgaden chalet, a fire-blackened wreck.
His remote chalet was one of the locations in which the Allies planned to assassinate Adolf Hitler. Today's documents reveal the details of Operation Foxley, several daring ways they planned to kill the Führer. For months, Britain's Special Operations Executive worked behind enemy lines, gathering information on his daily routines. They drew plans of Hitler's daily walk to breakfast, Special agents considered poisoning his drinks. But Hitler was wary of attempts on his life, and agents decided he'd notice any change. The documents also show plans to persuade a female cleaner to poison the water supply on board his train. They also considered throwing a suitcase of explosives under the carriage. One idea that was quickly dismissed was impregnating his clothes with lethal bacteria if they could get an assassin close enough.
Why go to all the palaver of using a poison? All that you need to get is a strong man within arm's reach of Hitler. He can do it with his bare hands.
Eventually, they narrowed the plans down to a sniper attack during one of his parades, blowing up his train, or an all-out aerial bombardment. But major strategists started to doubt the wisdom of the plan.
Because Hitler was so bad a strategist that it was suited the Allied cause much better to leave him in charge than to bump him off.
Despite their reservations, the Allies were still searching for a suitable assassin to carry out Operation Foxley when Hitler committed suicide.
Floods have taken a high toll along southern China's Yangtze River. At least 1,000 people have been killed and many more are missing. As well, at least 20,000 homes have been destroyed. Torrents have devastated farmland and washed away roads and power lines. The flooding is considered the worst in almost half a century. Scientists in Hawaii have made a huge leap forward in animal cloning. Their new technique producing 3 generations of identical mice, 50 in all. They took nuclei from ovarian cells of brown mice, transferred them to black mouse egg cells whose own nuclei had been removed, and the minute embryos were then implanted into the wombs of white mice. The scientists say mice, which breed quickly, are the perfect tool for inexpensive cloning experiments. Researchers believe cloning will one day allow them to mass-produce organs, such as hearts and kidneys, for transplants. For a long stretch